Welcome back to the Berg podcast. As you can tell, either Brian has a deep cold or he's actually out right now, so we have hijacked his system. It's going to be Dan
Hey, everybody.
and myself, Ford. And we're just chatting a little bit because it's close to holidays. We're putting bids in, getting ready for springtime. Lots of stuff going on at the same time around here.
Yeah, we got it's an odd time of year because everybody expects it to slow down, and you don't have 2 seconds to do anything because this is heavy bidding season in commercial and in landfill, and it is end of year for a lot of other companies, so they're trying to get work done, and it's end of year in terms of weather, so people were trying to get paving down, trying to get concrete down, trying to get things buttoned up, get projects closed out so they can keep dollars in one year or the other, and then at the same time, you have your normal end of year stuff with, the holidays and everything else and people trying to take vacations and spend time with their families and do everything. And then of course we have a lot of hunting going on as well. I don't know exactly when that falls, but I know it just happened. So
When you see the crew's little light, there's someone's in the woods somewhere.
they're in the woods. They're in the woods. Yeah, that's what they're doing. So it's an interesting time of year for us. We have a lot of bids out there. We're still seeing, the bidding's still strong. We still continue to see that between whether it's the impact on the government's effectiveness or whether it's the impact of the tightening monetary policies, that the jobs aren't inherently starting as quick as they were previously, but the number of jobs we have online and ready to go, as I've talked to the crews about it, it makes me nervous, if anything else, that these all go. We're going to be in a position that we have never been in where we actually say like, okay, we're not going to do this work. We're going to take job A, not job B, because it's a better opportunity. So we're in a really good spot, but you just want to, this time of year, I always feel like I wish it was, January, you know what I mean? Which is a terrible thing to do, but I do feel that way.
Because you love snow. But
yeah, that's why.
Well, and just the craziness of life. Like there's stuff every night going on with outside of work, like between sporting events and everything else. It's like you're getting done and you're going to something else. You're like, actually work was calmer than what I have to do this evening type deal. It gets kind of like that. But no, the interesting thing is that like, we've talked about it before, but the macroeconomics and, you watch the TV and they're all saying one thing, and then we're not in a bubble, but we're in a well-developed market where things are still going to happen. It's not, somewhere new where things are popping up crazy, but things need to be done, buildings need to be built, that kind of stuff. And so there's a constant flow. It might not be like a huge, gigantic flow at one time, like there is in some other markets we've seen, but there's just constantly stuff that has to get done. And so it's been, it might slow down, but it might not slow down as much as other places, and it might not speed up as much as other places. It's more of a steady flow in our area, I think.
Yeah, I had read an article and it was talking about the fact that there's the mega project, and then there's residential, and then there's everything else. Like, because realistically, the mega projects are really going because of the influx of federal money into a bunch of different programs. In Ohio, it's the CHIP program is really impacting them with a couple of huge chip plants. Or in PA, it's a lot of roads and infrastructure work. And then residential still continues to go in spite of everything because of the housing shortage. So you have those two markets that are really going. And then you have the private commercial market trying to figure it out, okay, where do we go? What do we need? How many office buildings do you need? Are the jobs virtual? What does the future of work look like? All those things. So it's a really dynamic time in that sense. And, I feel like there is a sense of stability that, we know what's going to happen and we know where it's going to go, sort of thing. We have a feel for it. We're not unaware of what's coming. But at the same time, this time of year, you always get a little antsy as you close jobs out and you start new. And we would not feel any better if every job was starting January, because we'd be talking about how are we going to do this work in the dead of winter in the Northeast when the temperature is going to go up and down. It's going to turn the sites into a muddy mess. And, I wish they wouldn't start till March. And then you end up in a position where we probably have a lot of our jobs are going to start February, March. And we'll sit here and say like, oh man, I wish they were starting in January. You always want what you don't have.
Well, it's kind of like it's Christmas season. So it's like Christmas. It happens every year on December 25th.
Yep.
Right. But the 2 weeks before that, no matter what happens, you're still running around like crazy trying to get things done. It's like, so like we know every year the cycle is pretty much identical. It adjusts a little bit based on weather, but the schedule is the same. But when you're in that middle of it, you're like, all right, get this started. It's like, why would we get that started when it's not going to be productive to get it started? But you're just trying to keep the flow going. That's the part about construction that no one understands, is that it's not a steady flow. it has seasonality to it that can get crazy at certain times of year, and other times of year it slows down. But you'd rather have that consistent flow.
Yeah, and we have a few, they're not big projects, but we have a few projects that we're going to do right now with some emergency work and some remediation work and then some pond work that we would target to do this time of year. Like it's perfect because it frees up certain crews and the guys can go do this thing and we do well at it. So it's an interesting stretch here that we get into. Um, and then the other interesting thing is the actual holiday. That we have a break coming up, and we try and figure out what that looks like for people. As some people take vacation towards the end of the year, either because they want to or because they haven't taken it other times, and so they got to take some vacation. And so we try and manage through that, and deal with that, and also give people their time and their space to spend a few days, whether it be Christmas Eve or Christmas or New Year's or any of those, with their family and spend a little bit of time. So we'll see. And we've had a quick start to winter. Like it's not I mean, this isn't 1983 when we would get pounded with snow, but comparatively, I mean, it's been
Compared to
chilly
last year.
compared to last year. It's been chilly and it started to get cold. It feels like winter, and we're in a pattern where you're seeing precipitation. So, that's something that we also have to deal with as a company, as a team, because it's, um, I don't know that I said it anywhere else, but there was a large site that we could have gone after again if we wanted to, and we elected not to. But you and I discussed it, and I just said, we aren't really the same group of guys that did that. We have way more people, but I don't know that I don't know how many of the people have the wherewithal to go do that again. So
I don't know if we knew then either, but we were
yeah,
just doing
yeah,
it.
we didn't. We were just we were too naive. I'll use the nice word of naive. We were
That's the
too
most polite
naive.
word.
That's the most polite word for what happened there. But we were too naive to realize it. Now we realize it more. Um, but I mean, it's an interesting time. We put in another bid today, right before we started the podcast. I feel good about it. We'll see the results shortly and see how that goes. It's an interesting opportunity for us to open up another avenue. And there are a lot of bids on the street when you talk about it right now. A lot of opportunities and people wanting to work with us, which is really what we started to look for. I think we talked about it. I don't know that we talked about it on a podcast though, that we wanted to get away from what I call dash one jobs, where we're just going out and trying to work for somebody who we've never worked for before. And we want to get back to what we built the company on, which was, you know, dash five, dash six. Yeah, I mean, we talk about it. You have special projects is on dash 77, dash, I mean, they may even be in three digits on a couple vendors, and we're on dash landfills on dash 30, dash 10, on a few contracts. And we're starting to get that way in commercial now, which is really nice to see. Because if you have a few vendors who really want to work with you, there's one job in particular, I believe we'll get it. It is local. It's with somebody we know. And if we get that, the owner and the GC elected to utilize us. So you just walk into that with a level of confidence that they expect a certain behavior and a certain work ethic from you, and we're able to provide that. And it just tones down the combative nature of our business and turns it into let's work together, which is where we really succeed.
Well, and I had an interesting thing. I'm on a board of a nonprofit in the community, and they were picking a general contractor for a job. And it was really interesting how some of the other board members had worked with different companies in the past, and their memories of what they saw on that job site helped them make their decision. There was dollars involved, which in life there is. There's no way
Mhm.
around that. But it was literally around they had done another project with somebody they really liked them, and so if it came down to basically a very similar dollar thing, they were going with the person that they had had a good experience with, and it was really interesting to see it at that level because. To us, we submit a bid and we're like, okay, it's dollars. That's all we ever think it is. And dollars matter, but they want to know that they're going to get a certain result. And they want to know how they're going to get the result too, because how they're going to deal with the person, how they're going to deal with the team. And people are constantly changing and faces are changing and names are changes and phone numbers are changing. But at the same time, if there's that core there, it really helped because some of these people hadn't worked with the company in like 10 years, but they remembered the experience that they had 10 years ago, and it helped them want to choose a particular contractor because of that experience. And I don't know if I think the dollars were very similar. It wasn't that, but it was like I don't know if like the dollars were different if they would be able to make that adjustment, but it was similar, and so that was the leaning factor of why they wanted to go with the particular person they do. And so, you know, closing out jobs strong and the relationships you build with the people you're working with they do matter as much as anything else. As dollars always matter as well, but that personal relationship actually does have a can have a bending factor at the end of the deal.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I mean, that's, I even feel that way for it about, as the labor market has continued to be difficult, it has, the tightening has finally stopped. And I think it's at a point now where I don't know what stability will be or if it'll get a little more fluid. But, you know, there's a, there's a number of guys who moved on for good opportunities for their families. It was money based because at the end of the day, just like a job is awarded or not awarded based on who gives the best price, in that labor market, that had to happen, and it did happen. And there's some guys who moved on that I'd welcome back. You know what I mean? It's an odd connection, but there's a similarity there that I know what I'm going to get. I know, we may need to be able to do this better or do that better. They need to have a little more experience of those things, but the same thing happens with personnel. And I know that internally with guys that are here, I feel that same way. When I want to do a certain thing, there's certain guys that immediately I say, like, this is the guy that, I want to do this, or one of these three guys, as I talk through it with the team. And I'm like, well, can we get these guys? Um, because I know what I'm going to get, and it's, as we've grown, it's one of the things we've had to adapt to is I don't know in terms of experience interacting, working with some of the guys that are younger, especially with the Big Longwood project, that they're down there and I know them and I can walk up and I can say hi. But have we worked together where they know like my attitude other than what someone may have said or how I'm going to interact with them as an employee? Because Longwood's its own little, its own little monster that runs down there. So I think as we go through the next year and we come out of Longwood, successfully, I think that's going to be interesting to see because we're going to get to experience guys who work for us on jobs that are more our type of job. And they're going to get to experience what it is to be part of Berg in a more natural setting for Berg, not in a heavy subcontractor driven, very micromanaged situation, but instead head into a job where a vendor wants us there and wants us because we're going to provide solutions. We're going to get them to the end and we're going to do a solid job. And it just changes the whole dynamic of how you feel on the job. And I think that that's important, and I think that whether it be guys who are here or guys who are not, that's how I want them to remember Berg. You know what I mean? I want them to look at it and say, like, I'd like to be at Berg, and it's not, I'm not right there right now, but maybe I will end up there again if, our paths cross. So I think it's important from a job standpoint. I think it's important from an employer standpoint that your employees want to be here with you. And I think it's really important from an employee standpoint that you want them to be part of your team. Like that we want to have this culture that we all sort of have a commonality in either the way we act or the way we think or our expectations of what we hold ourselves to, all those things, because that's what makes us able to do really good work when we do it.
Well, I mean, I think the key word you're dancing around was just consistency, right? I mean, that is the ultimate piece because it might not be fun, but consistency of they're always getting the same result is what matters most. And
Yeah.
if something, things go outside of that, margin from time to time, but the goal is to have that consistency and so that they know they're getting the same product every time that, our team is able to sit down on a job site. They know what they're getting, and that's what they want. They don't want surprises. Nobody wants surprises
No.
unless it's your birthday and you're like 6. But
Yeah.
other than that, you don't really want surprises, and so the consistency is what
Yeah.
matters. The neat part is too with like different crews. You know, I get to be in some of the meetings, and you hear like some of the field management team talking positive about different team members and what they're seeing out of them, and that's really cool to see that you're getting to hear it. Like before, it was our eyeballs on people and seeing how they did things, and now we're kind of there's a next group of people that are talking about those people, and they know who they want on their team for a particular situation. That's kind of neat to see it kind of filter down another layer and another group of people being able to determine what they see out of a team member.
Yeah. You know the other word with consistency that's really has become a very big focus for me is accountability. Because we're not going to do this work and not run into issues, right? Like nobody knows what's in the ground. As much as we want to say we do through different, technologies they develop and the engineering and all the plans and all the boring and everything else, the reality is the job's going to start and we have to figure out how to get to what that plan says. We have to get it from the existing plan to the finished plan, you know what I mean? To the post construction state. And it is not going to be a straight line. It's going to be something where we figure out how to get there. And the combination of being accountable and just keeping at it, just keeping at the grindstone, just keep chopping, those two things are how we get where we're going. And it's, when we're at our best, that's what we're doing.
Hey, you snuck in the reference to the keep chopping your wood, do
Yeah,
your
keep
job
chopping your
thing there.
wood, do your job. That's I've said it a few times lately, because it's hard when you're having a hard time, whether it be personally or professionally. The first thing you want to do is you sort of take a look. You pick your head up and like try and look like whose fault is it? Why is this happening? Look for a cause or a person to blame. Whether it's someone you're trying to blame or to figure out how this happened. You're trying to look at it, and when you do that, you a lot of times lose sight of just doing your piece. And that's the biggest thing for me. I mean, the number of times I say that, to just do your job. And someday I think I'm going to stop qualifying it so that it's not an insult and people just know it's not an insult, and that I genuinely mean it.
Well, because it creates accountability because do your job, it's not a put down. It's a fact that, like, if you're doing what you're supposed to be doing and the other person does what they're supposed to be doing, it will get done.
Yep.
It's not about, but, do your job, like, kind of has like a negative connotation if, someone walks in and just says that. But that's why you have to do your little
Yeah.
preface
It
around it.
sounds condescending.
Right.
Like if you don't understand
But it's more about, like, just focus on
right.
what is in front of you,
And you
and
just do
other
that
people
thing.
focus on their thing and the
Yep.
mosaic of it. Even in construction in general, I always say that, like, to the GCs or to whoever I'm talking to, we are their worst problem because we're in the ground, as you said, and they know how many 2x4s are going into the building. They know how many windows are going in the building, how many square foot of concrete. We are the wild card, and we're also the first one on a job site. So
Yeah.
between those two things, it starts off in a goofy position if they're finding things that they didn't expect, or if they expected them but they're not where they said they were. All that kind of stuff, where the elevations are goofy. You know, I haven't seen so many bust on surveys, and maybe it's because we weren't looking for it because we didn't know before. But in the old days, you went out, a set of stakes were there, you built it to the set of stakes, you walked off, you were done. And that's not the way it is anymore. And it's just the amount of time that I hear being dealt with those types of things. The GPS has helped, but it also has hindered because of, like, you know, you just built it before and it went off of whatever, but now you might find that that isn't right, or something small, especially with, like, stormwater issues, because of, if it doesn't drain the right direction, that's a problem.
Yeah, and when you think about it, how many times now, even now, and it happened with you, where you go to buy a property and the survey is not right. Now, you don't know that unless you really need the survey, right? Like when I purchased my house, I didn't get the survey. I know the stakes are there. I know roughly where my property lines are. It really does not matter.
Usually it's by the mow line.
Right. You know what I mean? Like it really doesn't matter. And it could be variable. Like who cares if you're out here in Lancaster County, it could be a couple feet one way or the other. What difference does it really make? But nothing changed. Like in other words, it's just that we have too much information. You know what I mean? Like I feel like, and that's like a product of what we've become. The GPSs are part of that. Social media is part of that. The news cycle is part of that. We have so much information that we realize stuff is wrong, and then we worry about it. When does it really matter? Like there was one specific project that the survey was off and it was not right, but the team built everything so that it worked. And we fought and we fought and we fought and we fought. And at the end of the day, it was off. And we told them it was off. Like we had enough to say it was off, but then you got into a blame game where everybody wanted to blame somebody because it was off. But at the end of the day, they had the exact size building they wanted on the property they wanted, and the water going. It made no difference. But everybody, instead of just owning whoever's problem it was, just having the accountability to just own that accountability, they wanted to defer that exposure. Right? They didn't want to have to admit they were wrong when that's there's probably nothing more human than being wrong. You know what I mean?
It's the most honest you can be.
It's
And
the
it's
most
also, do you think it's because, as costs have gone up, we're not even talking about inflation, but just costs have gone up, and we are in a stable, mature market. When people are doing a project now, they're maximizing their space to the bare everything. I mean, like, they're not going to leave 2 square foot on the edge go because they need it for impervious, they need it for grass, that kind of stuff. Where in the old days, someone had 10 acres, they built an acre on it, nobody cared. It was just, somewhere, as long as it's somewhere on those 10 acres. But now we're doing job sites where, excuse me, the neighbor's building is 5 feet off of X. And so that becomes more of a challenge. Whereas before, you're in wide open, we're doing this one job right now, we're in the wide open field. And so if it was off by 5 feet, isn't going to affect anything. But when we're doing other jobs and you're literally between two other buildings, that has a different, you know, feel to it because of those issues.
Yeah, I mean, I have two thoughts on that. So my first thought is, on top of the fact that there's limited space left, there's all these things. In order, because of that lack of space globally in our area, the management of stormwater has become a much bigger issue. And the cost and the use of space that that takes up has really made it difficult to do work for people. Not for us to do the work, but to make the job make sense
To make the
financially.
dollars make
To
sense.
make the dollars make sense has become very difficult. So I think that's part of the problem. And I think the other problem is, goes back to along those same lines, that once you start to do that, everybody is very careful, and nobody wants to be the one that made the mistake that then you get into a litigious situation. So because of that, you have limited space, whereas before you would have just built some swales and you get the water away and it's fine,
As long as it's off your property,
right?
no problems.
I mean, when we talk about the office, we were just trying to deal with getting finished up with some work we did here to increase the parking lot. We have a huge basin, an underground basin, 3 swales, a bunch of stuff. The majority of our problem here that we were trying to manage was that we are in beautiful farm country and there's a significant amount of farmland running right at us. And at some point in the middle of us constructing this design, the farmer himself got sick of how wet his field was, and the farmer just installed a drain and just punched it straight to the road. And so, I'm meeting with conservation, and it was a cold day, so everything was frozen. And she commented on it. She was like, "That whole road's frozen because of the farmer." And I was like, "Yeah, Meanwhile, we're standing in a very expensive basin built on top of a very expensive underground basin to maintain this water, and the farmer just punched it out to the road. And the farmer's not wrong. Like,
He had different set of rules,
he has a different
things.
set of rules, So I mean, if we could build things the way farmers are allowed to, we wouldn't argue. No surveyor would argue with us. An engineer wouldn't argue. They'd be like, "Yeah, just go ahead. That barn's going to be great."
Well, and the problem is that, there's a stream down the street and the next big storm happens that's bigger than it's supposed to be. Because, I mean, we've talked about this before, and maybe I should look it up someday so we don't just keep referring it. But the amount of 100-year storms we've had in the last 10 years, it seems way too high.
It does.
It
Doesn't rain. Again, here you go with, do we know more than we used to know?
More data.
Or has it really changed? Like, I don't ever really remember my dad talking about that it was going to rain an inch or two and it not be like catastrophic. You know what I mean? But I feel like we've become, when they talk about the South, if it's going to snow an inch, like,
the world ends.
The world ends. Like, Atlanta's going to shut down. There'll be cars in the parking on the highway that they're going to have to tow out of there. Meanwhile, you go into Minnesota or northern Maine, it could snow 2 feet and the kids still have school. It's just it's a completely different perspective. So maybe it's that, but I really feel like there has been some shift, and the storms are stronger and they're faster. They hit you very quickly. But I personally have not been around long enough to be able to say what the cause is or anything else of that shift. But at the end of the day, I always say to people, like, all I really care about is results. So I'm so result driven that I don't really care why it's raining. It's raining, and it's raining hard, and there's a lot of macadam that's got to run off somewhere.
Well, 2 quick stories about that. One was we actually did a job years ago for a pond, and they had to clean the pond out. And here it was, in the last 30 years, they'd built like 15 subdivisions uphill of it, and all that sediment had come down to them. So, was it their fault? No. Was it the brunt to them to bear to pay to clean it out? But everything just flowed down the hill, so it wasn't a problem. There's another job back when we first started. It wasn't our job. It was someone else we know. And they built these basins, the temporary storm basins. Now, most of them are built to a 2-year storm, which is basically, X. We had one of these big ones, 100-year storms. And it blew out all their stormwater controls down the streets. It was just not a good situation. And they were like, first trying to go back on the contractor, like he didn't build something right. And the reality is that nobody understands that the engineering on it was only designed to handle X. It wasn't like it can't handle everything all the time. And, sometimes it just gets lost because they don't see that. They see the equipment moving that dirt. They don't see that it was engineered to do X. and X plus Y happened, and so they can only handle a certain piece of it. There's nothing they can get around on that.
Now, we were just talking yesterday in the meeting about we have a project that's going to come online shortly. Another nice like farm type project, and the owner wants to build themselves a nice basin to fix this basin. They're going to let me say it again. They're going to fix the basin, and they would like to fix it with boulders. They've done well, and they can afford to make a really nice looking pond. But if they make the nice looking pond, they have to wait probably a year to do it because they're going to need DEP approval to build the basin that way. But if they just fix the exact same basin and it has less capacity and doesn't have any boulders, which, for those who don't realize, a rock is more solid than mud, so it's an improvement, but they will likely not build that improvement because of the way it'll get held up, because of the permitting to approve them to make the better fix, and you take that with what I'm saying about the drain. If you actually had a farm and owned, I'm not going to single any farmers we know out, but if there's some farmers around here that if they wanted to put in a basin that was already a basin, they'd just, they'd go ahead and build
Get it
that basin.
done.
That basin be built very quickly, and it's because they know what they're doing. There was a level of trust that they know what they're doing. But the more those developments creep around everybody, and not developments, I should say development because it could be anything. The more the development creeps around, the less place there is for water to go. So it's something that's got to be managed. But it's like the chicken or the egg. I don't know which is really the problem, but I know right now the cost of building things has gone up because of the requirements of what you have to do to build them.
And we've talked about before, like the stormwater requirements that I've seen on some of these subdivisions in different places have make the job. I mean, like, unfortunately, jobs in the old days, in my mind, it was before my time, but like it felt like it was a gut decision. Like some guy goes, I can build 30 houses here and I'll be able to make a living off of it. And now it's basically an Excel spreadsheet. Like within 5 minutes, they'll be able to, like, I need to have 42 lots and at this much to make this work, X,
Yeah.
Y, and Z. And in some places, you just can't do that. But the thing is that the stormwater costs have gone up so much for the developer. And it's more work for us, but it's not more money in our pocket. It's just more, the costs have gone up on, materials have gone up, blah, blah, blah. And that's the same old song we've talked about before. But, all of a sudden, the stormwater management on a job is actually more expensive than the whole rest of the job combined.
Yeah, I mean, and Brian's not here to it's not defend himself, but to speak on it. But when we talk about the combination of stormwater and things being off in older developments, like Brian's is a great example. You know what I mean? He's been struggling with that basin, and when you hear some of the stories of where those property lines actually fall, I mean, do you remember the project we looked at? It was up in northern Montgomery, Bucks County, and I'm not going to call out what project it was. We didn't end up getting it, and we walked it, and they showed us the property line. Remember, the property line was through people's deck. They were like, it was a site that had to be remediated, but they were remediating an area that appeared to be like in the person's living room, it's like, well, you do realize there's a house there like this, that's how lost the property lines were over the years. Because if you have a manufacturing plant, you didn't used to care about the periphery of that plant. Like if you lost some of that land because, a nearby neighbor just kept mowing a little further, it was just less you had to mow.
Less maintenance costs.
Go ahead. Your maintenance costs went down. You want to mow it, you mow it. And there was but all of a sudden it becomes a problem over time. So I don't know how we got on this topic. I don't know what the topic of today was. You see what happens when we don't have Brian.
Nobody keep us straight in the narrow there. Well, no, I mean, there's been multiple jobs where like they have to go in and mess with basins and you like go to the job site. And I don't know how many we just like, yeah, we'll pass on that. Cause you're just going to get a black eye and it's not even anything your fault, but people have storage barns, they have fences, they have patios, and you're like, nobody checked, but there's a right of way between these two houses that basically means all of that stuff is going to go away.
Yeah.
So you're starting out a job with people already not being happy that you're there, and it just isn't a good look. It's not a thing that, is beneficial for us in any way, shape, or form.
No. So a quick funny story. So growing up, my mom's family owned about, and I'd say total, it was probably about 9 or 10 acres on a corner and in this country town that is no longer a country town. And so my great grandfather, who came from Italy, bought the property when his sons were in Korea, and they built one house, and his kids were all grown, obviously. And then my grandfather and my mom bought a piece of the land and built their house in the back. And then the brothers were supposed to move there. Eventually, my great uncle bought another piece next to it, adjacent to it, and built his house there. And it reminds me of this because where those property lines actually are from where I would have thought they were as a kid, like, it was purely just them drawing stuff up on a piece of paper. I mean, there was
So they just had a big, like, square, and they just basically drew a line, like,
yeah,
"Okay, you can have
yeah,
this piece, you
yeah,
can
it
have
was
this
like a
piece."
crescent shaped it was like it would have been like it was an amazing baseball field. You could cut a gorgeous baseball field into that property, and we did at times. But when you actually look at it, like, all of a sudden we realized, like, my uncle's garage, my uncle inherited my grandmom's houses, was almost like it's right on the edge of the property for no reason. Like, just because they said, "Yeah, we'll give you how much you need? Okay, sure. We'll draw the line right there." Like, there was not a rhyme or reason to how you divided up the property. It was just, you know, I guess a surveyor
Or
came out and
how
just
many
said,
lot lines do you see that bounce, and the only reason they bounce is because the building was built and they had to stay 10 feet off, so it has, like, a
yeah,
jog
so
in
it
the
has like a
line.
jog in it. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
and the funny part is we're still doing it today. Down the shore at Aaron's family's house, they demoed the house next door and put a new one up. I have no idea what they were thinking. Like, I mean, the shore is tight and everybody knows it, but their door to get in their house, Ford's, you've been to my house. I am not joking. They are going to hit their head on my electric meter. Like, it's going to happen. They're going to walk out of their door, walk out of their shower
In the
to go into
dark.
their door in the dark, and they are going to drill their head on the side of my electric meter because my house is right to the property line, and they built theirs even as close or closer. I don't know how they got that close. Well, they overhung it. That's how they did it. But they're going to walk in. They're going to somebody's going to be getting stitches from walking into my electric meter because and it's like who thought this was a good idea?
Gotta maximize that square footage.
Right. You know what I mean? But they didn't even account for the doors. That's when we get into you and I talking about like an architect or an engineer that it's beautiful, but did you think about the
Accessibility.
practicality of what you actually did?
Yeah, but they maximize the square
They
footage, that's
did
what mattered.
maximize. I got to give them credit. They did maximize the square footage.
Well, before we go off deeper into our tangent of about nothing and the stormwater and all the other fun stuff, I think we'll wrap it up here. But no, it is an interesting time to do, construction. I mean, I think everybody says that as they go through because whenever their time is, it's interesting. But it just seems that every day there's a new surprise and a new thing we work around, and that's the nature of our business is just to get it done. So hope you come back next time, and if we don't get to talk to you again, Merry Christmas to everybody. We'll talk to you soon.